Welcome to another episode of the Gray Havens podcast. My name is Dave Radford, part of the band The Gray Havens, and in today's episode, we are talking about our song, Tread the Dawn. Before we get started, once again, just letting you guys know that we are headed out on tour this spring to bring these songs to life on stage. Really excited about that. We're getting really close and can't wait to see you guys at the shows. There's tickets on our website, thegrayhavensmusic.com. There's some pre-show stuff, Q&A. There's some post-show stuff. There's ticket links, dates, all that good stuff on our website. And that is all for the announcements today. So without further ado, let's dig into our song, Tread the Dawn. Here we go. This is the preamble to the preamble. There is a healthy amount of me talking about the context framing the song in this one before we actually dive into the music. So if that's your thing, stick around. If it's not your thing, definitely don't stick around. Okay, end of preamble to the preamble. If you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time leading up to this episode, you'll know that the original spark that got me inspired to write this album was the book Planet Narnia by Michael Ward. And see past episodes for a rabbit trail description on all of those things. Actually, probably see most episodes, so I'm not going to do that this time. So it might not come as a surprise, if you've been following along, that this song entitled Tread the Dawn was inspired in part by the Chronicles of Narnia, book entitled The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It is probably my favorite of all the Narnia books. I don't know for sure. I usually go back to it, though, as my definitive answer. And I don't know anyone who has read the Chronicles of Narnia books more than I have, except for one person, who is my 6-year-old son, Simon. He has listened to each book, probably on audiobook, about 20 times, I want to say. And that is not an exaggeration. He listens to one a day sometimes. And I bring that up because it's interesting to sort of talk shop or inside baseball with Simon about the Narnia series. And I like to ask him his favorite book from time to time because it's apparent that the struggle is very real for him in answering that question. But I think he would say that The Last Battle is the definitive answer for him because of the ending. I remember him reading or just finishing I read it to him the first time through, and just the look on his face when I was reading the final few chapters of The Last Battle was just priceless because he was so moved by the ending where all the characters, most of the characters get to go to this redeemed new Narnia. And I just remember him almost with tears in his eyes saying, "It's too good. It's too good." It was really, really sweet. And actually, it was really good timing because it gave him, I think, a bit of a taste of what the Bible is trying to get at when it, or not trying to get at, what it gets at when it describes heaven. And sometimes it's a hard thing for a kid and even an adult to grasp. What is that going to be like? And this is a kind of an echo of what that will be like, I think, in some ways. And so it was really good timing because Alicia's dad, Simon's grandpa, had passed away or did pass away like a week or two after he had read that or heard that read to him. And I remember we sat him down to tell him that Grandpa had died, and Alicia had said something to the effect of, so we're not going to be able to see him anymore. And it was so sweet. It really actually encouraged us in the moment. He had been in Leisha's arms, and he kind of pulled back to look at her in the face and said, but we will see him again. And I think that story of the last battle really kind of helped him feel hopeful about seeing his grandpa again. So that was a really special moment, and it was really special just to read him the story. But like I said, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader is my favorite of the Narnia books. And when I was preparing for this episode, I had to pause for a minute and think about why that was. And I think it's because you get the sense of hanging out with your favorite characters the most in this book as opposed to any other story. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, say, the characters are all of their interactions are constantly moving the plot forward, and the pace is always quickening and the plot is thickening, and all of that is necessary for that book, and that's an amazing book. But the kind of more laid backness of this book lets the characters shine a little bit more and breathe. And obviously, Reepicheep gets a lot more face time in this book. I think that's why I think you're just kind of like on a ship and you're hanging out with characters you like in Narnia, and you're kind of taking a tour of it. And I don't know, it does it for me for some reason. So that is my reasoning behind it's my favorite book. And we should probably move on to the actual talking about the song now, again entitled Tread the Dawn. And it was tricky to know where to place this song on the album. We thought at one point it might be the last song, but we ended up going with Summer Meets Winter. But we thought to put it last for half a second because it felt like a turning point for me when I was writing the lyrics for this song on the album. And in some ways, I imagined this song as a song about C.S. Lewis's conversion from pessimistic, cynical, skeptic, agnostic to believer in Christianity. Well, God first, and then that Jesus was who he says he was. And this conversion, according to Lewis's letters anyways, was heavily inspired by a famous conversation that Lewis had with J.R.R. Tolkien about myth. And our older song, Silver, was based on this conversation. And the story goes like this. They're out on a walk late one night, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and I always forget the name of the third guy. I feel like everybody does. But the three of them are out on a walk late at night, and they're talking about one of their favorite subjects, which is myths and stories. And they shared a passion for myths interwoven with themes of good triumphing over evil, love that never parts, friendships, even with non-human beings. And before his conversion, Lewis held that these myths were nice ideas, good stories, but lies breathed through silver. Maybe beautiful, but ultimately you can't take them to be true, and he would throw Christianity into that myth category. But Tolkien argued back that Christianity was in fact the true myth, the one to which all the other good stories were ultimately pointing to. And later, after his conversion, Lewis would point to these themes that I just mentioned as proof for Christianity. Instead of lies breathed through silver, they were the, quote, scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. And real quick, one of Lewis's favorite myths, he actually mentions it early in Surprised by Joy. So real quick recap, in case this is your first time listening. Surprised by Joy is Lewis's autobiography. He tells it through the lens of this recurring experience he calls joy, this unsatisfied desire, more desirable than any satisfaction. See previous episodes for a much more at-length description. But in the book, he gives, I think, 3 or 4 early life, childhood experiences with joy. And one of them is in reading this myth about Balder the Beautiful. It's a Norse myth, and I'm actually going to tell the story of the myth really quick because it does give some context for the lyrics in this song and actually one of the later songs in the album called Anyone. And so the myth of Balder the Beautiful, Balder the Good, he's called the god of light. He is sent by Odin. You probably have heard about Odin. He is sent to go rescue the earth from Hodor, the blind god of darkness, who has turned the earth and everything in it into a realm of darkness. And Balder, being the god of light, is sent on his winged horse to the earth. He shows up, smiles on the earth, calls it to awake, which it does, and streams begin flowing, singing even. Everything blossoms, animals come out from hiding, and eventually Balder's mom comes over, I think on a rainbow, and she went throughout all of the earth begging, trying to convince each plant or tree, stone, not to bring any harm to her son, who had blessed them from the release of Hodor's dark grasp. And so everyone agrees. All of the trees, shrubs, pebbles, streams, rocks, they all promise not to bring any harm to Balder, except for a mistletoe, which grows up high in an oak tree and not on the ground. That plant was forgotten, and Loki, the god of mischief, finds out that the mistletoe did not promise to not bring any harm, and he tells Hodor, who then tips an arrow with this mistletoe, which he shoots at Balder, and he kills Balder. And this is the section of the poem or myth that Lewis quotes in his book, Surprised by Joy, as an early occasion for joy. So I'm going to read this quote from the story first. It says, "I heard a voice that cried, 'Balder the Beautiful is dead, and through the misty air passed like the mournful cry of sunward sailing cranes, Balder the Beautiful, god of the summer sun.'" End quote. So Lewis reads this as an 8-year-old kid, as one does, reading Norse mythology / poetry as an 8-year-old. He reads it, and this occurrence of joy enters the scene. He says about it later in life, quote, "I knew nothing about Balder, but instantly I was uplifted into huge regions of northern sky. I desired with almost sickening intensity something never to be described. And then, as in the other examples, found myself at the very same moment already falling out of that desire and wishing I were back in it." End quote. And so this story was really gripping to Lewis as an occasion for joy, and I just cite it as an example of a myth that Lewis might have had in mind in this conversation that he holds with Tolkien on this walk. It's like they both love these myths, and Lewis, obviously in his life, desperately wants to believe that this feeling that he has, this feeling of joy, he wants to locate it somewhere. He wants it to be real, but he doesn't actually believe that it comes from anywhere real up until this point in his life. But this conversation about myth and Christianity being the true myth really resonated with Lewis. And 2 weeks later, by some people's accounts, there's of course debate on this, but shortly after this conversation, according to a lot of people, Lewis takes a ride to the zoo on this sidecar with his brother. So they're on a motorcycle, he's on the sidecar, and in his book, Surprised by Joy, he says about that trip, quote, "When we set out, I did not believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And when we reached the zoo, I did. Yet I had not exactly spent the journey in thought, nor in great emotion. Emotional is perhaps the last word we can apply to some of the most important events. It was more like when a man, after a long sleep, still lying motionless in bed, becomes aware that he is now awake." What a sentence. I love that last sentence. That is just That's why I love Lewis. But one more bit of trivia before we leave this scene and actually talk about the song. Really, this is, it really is the backstory, the true backstory of this song. So this one's going to run a little bit longer than usual, but it is just so poetically awesome that actual blue flowers make an appearance in his conversion scenario, scene, atmosphere. He, in talking about the zoo later in the book, just a couple pages later, he says, quote, "They have spoiled Whipsnade since then," I guess the location of the zoo. "Wallaby Wood, with the birds singing overhead and the bluebells underfoot and the wallabies hopping all around one, was almost Eden come again." Those bluebells are the blue flowers, which inspired all the literature and German Romantic literature, which Lewis references in the first few chapters of the book. There was at 6 years old a votary of the blue flower. It was the symbol of this elusive longing that Lewis experiences throughout his life. And it's in his, sort of at the end of his conversion scene here, which is awesome. So with all of that as foreground and backstory, hopefully it will have some payoff. What I want to do is play through the intro and verse 1 and dive into the lyrics a little bit. And if we have time, we'll go into some of the production stuff. So here is the intro and verse 1.
Having doubts, I missed the mark. I sailed away from silver shores with heaven loud in my heart, shining gold like summer now, calling down through the clouds. Are you sunward sailors now? Think it's time, think it's time.
Okay, diving in a little bit to the lyrics. Hopefully all of the preamble made you kind of think, oh, this is connected to that, that's connected to this, but been having doubts, missed the mark, sailed away from silver shores. That was the lies breathe through silver conversation reference. And with heaven loud in my heart, shining gold like summer now. We've talked about in the past how summer overtaking winter, almost as in the soul, like in the state of the soul, summer overtaking winter is a sub-theme of the album. And the next bit, calling down through the clouds, all you sunward sailors, that was a reference to the sunward sailing cranes in the Balder the Beautiful story. I think it's time we tread the dawn is just, we're heading towards Aslan's country. We're leaving the land of silver. We're heading towards what's true, heading to the utter east. And going to play now the second verse, dive into the lyrics, and then we'll get into some production stuff. Here we go.
Had a dragon heart, chasing foolish gold. I made eyes like lions that tore me apart and hit the water cold. Like an endless summer now, calling down through the clouds. Are you sunward sailors? Think it's time, think it's time. Tread the dawn. We are.
Okay, so this second verse, if you're any kind of Narnia fan, you're probably picking up major Eustace Scrub vibes here in the second verse with the dragon story. And if you had been thinking that, you are definitely on the right track. So in the book, spoiler alert, Eustace Scrub turns into a dragon because he goes into the cave of this dragon and puts on some of the treasure, a bracelet onto his arm. He goes to sleep, he wakes up, and he's a dragon. He's kind of this dragonish, nasty character before that. And he meets Aslan, who is the only one that can undragon him. And anyway, it's an amazing scene, but this whole sequence of lyrics is that basically conversion story and baptism of Eustace. It's awesome. You should read it if you haven't. And I think at this point, let's switch gears to some of the production stuff. So this one was a lot of fun to make. I was trying to dig up an old voice memo, and it was actually really encouraging when I went back to look at old voice memos, because I've been in about a 1.5-ish rut of not being able to finish a song. I'm not sure why that is, but as I was looking back through old voice memos trying to find an early one for this particular song, I was just reminded, all of these songs were in bad shape at one point and weren't very good. That was kind of encouraging to me, because the further you get away from having finished something, the more menacing it seems to do it. So this is a clip of me messing around with melodies and lyrics in my studio. If you're really paying attention, you'll notice that there's a piano line in this voice memo that becomes the verse melody, even though at that point it was just sort of a background theme. So here it is.
We are searching for answers to base enough to know.
So that was the earliest voice memo that I could find for that song. I don't have a ton more, but when it came to recording the actual song, I'm actually not going to do a nitty-gritty deep dive on the production for this song, but instead I'm just going to highlight my favorite parts that we recorded. I'm just going to start with what's in the intro. I don't know how or why or when I came up with this piano hook, but I really liked it for this song. And that, in addition to the acoustics, sort of carry the intro. So here are those. And with the acoustic guitar. And those are pretty much the vibes throughout verse 1, keeping it fairly sparse. And then in the chorus, we have some entrances by the strings and the horns. These were a lot of fun to come up with Ben Shive, a master arranger at all things strings and horns, but at all things in general. So here's what those sound like in the chorus. We are searching for answers. We are. Not sure if you caught this, but there is a rogue flute sound that is happening. It's sort of its own hook going on. It was deep in a sound library somewhere, and we nicked it, and now it is ours. Here's what that sounds like. Okay, so I want to move on to the bridge now, and this section, I'm so happy with how it turned out. It's got to be one of my top 3 moments on the album. It just feels like such a moment of arrival musically. And we had our good friend Joel Russo sing background vocals on this. I sent it off to him and said, hey, could you send some ideas for us? And he just absolutely nailed it. I mean, his vocals are insane on this. He's got the big kind of high vocal that you're about to hear. And then, so I'll just highlight different things and fade stuff up, and we'll see what happens. But here is one of my top moments on the album. I played through that outro of the bridge just because I just wanted to keep it going and not take you out of it. But I want to go back and highlight a couple of the voice parts that Joel sent us in that bridge outro that were just so great. One of them is this da, da, da vocal descending thing that he does. And then another is like he did this vocal percussion thing where I think he's just using his teeth to, or he's like saying the word TSU, like, like it's, who thinks of this stuff? So fun. And I think that is where we're going to leave it for today. If you have a question that you want to submit to the podcast, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description that I'll leave. And once again, if you can, leave us a review if you like the podcast. That helps us out a ton as far as getting new listeners in future. And until next time, thanks so much for listening. We are going to go ahead and play through the entirety of the song Tread the Dawn.
Been having doubts, I missed the mark. I sailed away from silver shores with heaven loud in my heart, shining gold like summer now, calling down through the clouds. Are you sunward sailors now? Think it's time we tread the dawn. We are searching for answers. We are searching for answers. Had a dragon heart, chasing foolish gold. I met eyes like lions that tore me apart and hit the water cold. Like an endless summer now, calling down through the clouds.